Good afternoon, everybody. This is going to be hopefully painless but informative for you. I'm going to use 5 slides to really look at the overall methodology. It's very important to understand what method we use to get to the conclusions and the analysis. Firstly, the problem we faced when you look at 2,770 organisations from central government, NHS to 14 different private subsectors is where would you go at a database that told you consistently how each of those are progressing and thinking about sustainability? The answer is there isn't one. There will be one next year. It will be the CRC tables, because you'll be able to see what they're thinking and what they're doing. So we were faced with that first problem, which was to find out how could we generate a fair, comprehensive, unbiased methodology that looked at organisations that range from vast NHS trusts to smaller private companies. So it had to be consistent across the whole piece and to have readily available information for every organisation. Now it doesn't exist, so we spent many months looking at, well, how could we actually create and discover this? We had to avoid the bias, the judgment, and it had to be able to measure the depth of interest of each of these organisations in the sustainability path that we hope everyone is along. What we did in the end, and it's an old technique of doing message traffic in a sense, we looked at 64 million different web hits, and we were looking at the web search for each organisation. How many times do these organisations look at certain indicators that are important to the sustainability journey? And I'll come back to the indicators on another slide. So we're looking at the rate of chatter, the rate of traffic for each organisation. And at this stage of the report, we're looking at the subsectors. We're not trying to analyse individual organisations at this point. We may well do it at a later date. We're trying to understand the 19 subsectors and how do they vary with respect to each other. And by doing that, we had enough information. We sampled about 40% of the participants in order to get statistically relevant data for each subsector. As I said, we spent 3 months actually just trying to find out what are the 4 indicators that tell us the degree of sophistication around sustainability for any organisation. We looked at over 60 different terms and phrases and honed it down to the 4. We found out on average as well, we were very interested in how did this vary as a technique. And we found that we were only getting a variation at an individual organisation level of about plus or minus 1% change in their measure per week. So when you looked at a subsector level, like all of manufacturing, we could see very little change in any one week in the actual data. That gave us confidence that we had a very good time-based accuracy. But we also made sure that we did the research, the data gathering, in less than a week with a large team, so that we were really mitigating against any issues of variability of data against the time. So what do we do? We're looking for 4 terms that increasingly show the level of sophistication of an organisation when it thinks about sustainability. So the first one, literally, it's a series of words and terms around sustainability itself. And as you'll see later on, nearly everyone talks about sustainability. The second depth of measurement, the second indicator, which is about how are these organisations talking about and thinking about, and how much are they discussing managing carbon. The third one is a deeper one still. We've seen organisations appointing corporate social responsibility execs, both in the public and the private space. So that's a third level of sophistication. So that's our third indicator. And our deepest and most probing indicator was people discussing the social return on investment from the whole sustainability and carbon management area. So as you go down these, we found less and less organisations talking about each of these indicators. And we needed that. We needed something that was most people were talking about down to finer things that very few were talking about. That enables us to build an index showing who are sort of leading and who are the lower players. So, simple bit of maths using chart diagrams. So first of all, looking at an organisation, we had to set a base level. So for any organisation, what is all the web traffic associated with that exact company name from the database? So anything they talk about, anyone talks about them, we counted how many times they appeared on the web. We then specifically, for the specific indicator term, said how often did this appear with respect to this organisation, and then you can simply see what we're going to do is say what share of the proportion of the whole is this indicator. So it's really a kind of chatter level. Are they talking little about this or a lot about it? And then we do it for the second indicator, third indicator, and the fourth indicator. Take another company, this is smaller. So it shouldn't be prejudiced by being smaller and therefore most probably having less web traffic overall. What we're interested in is the rate of web traffic this organisation has around the indicators. And the example I've used in this case is it's got exactly the same amount of web hits for this indicator. That size is the same size as that. But this scores better for the first indicator because that is a bigger proportion of the whole than the first organisation. So they would rank higher on indicator 1. This tags out any bias, any variation in size of organisations, and lets you really look at the intensity of discussions around the subject area. Indicator 2, they're talking about less, so they're going to score worse on a ranking from that. And in fact, you see here, they're not even talking about the third indicator. So you start to see some organisations talking about everything at a high level, way down to some organisations talking about a few of them. In fact, we found 15% of the private sector didn't mention any of them, which is maybe a concern. What we do from this is basically create a league table. We combine the 4 indicators and we put the best combination, organisation with the best combination at the top, we give them 100%, and all the way down to the bottom 0%. It's a bit like the Premier League for indicators. But this is indicator frequency, and that's what we're measuring there. Then what I want to do is introduce this very as a common curve. It's the rate of adoption for products, ideas, things like that. So you always find very early on there's very few leaders in an organisation adopting. These are the early people who get into ideas and products. Then you get the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. So we wanted to divide the league table into the sort of Champion League potential people, and then the follow-up. So we broke it. Everyone we put in the leaders group was everyone who scored 80% on the index and above. So that way we can easily assign the overall segmentation to the population. So we can assign the sort of naming convention to everyone up here: leaders, early majority, late majority, and laggards. But there's more you can. So first of all, you can create a league table. The second thing is the indicators tell you a lot more. You can actually look at an indicator for a population, and you can see from the leaders to the laggards how does their rate of conversation rise or fall as you go across that. So what we do first of all is we look at the frequency of discussion for an indicator. Nobody gets 100%. That would be an organisation that all they ever talked about was the indicator, nothing else. What we do find is some organisations talk about maybe sustainability at 10% of everything they talk about. Maybe it's becoming too ubiquitous. They're just talking about sustainability because it's there. Then on the horizontal axis, we plot the 4 groups. And what you can get is a typical curve, which is more than likely higher amongst the leaders, and we tend to find that it's flattening off. This is a very generalised curve. You'll see some more detailed ones later, and tends to be low amongst the laggards. So what you're getting is really, and I've gone back to the graphic we had before, you can see here, this group are reasonably still talking about them, and the laggards are talking little, if at all, about the four indicators. So you can see this curve for a whole population shows you the sort of degree of interest across that population. You can apply it to all CRC, public sector, a subsector, any group within that.